Decision making can feel a little bit overwhelming. You have so many different question types to do, which you probably haven't even heard of. Answering a bunch of yes or no questions, doing logic puzzles, and having to read so much, it can be difficult. But what if I told you that decision making can become your easiest section? The key to unlocking all the different question types is just by having the perfect technique. So in this video, that's what we're going to be looking at. I'm going to be telling you the great technique that you need to be able to ace your decision making section in the UCAT. Hi, I'm Loveleen. I sat the UCAT last year, got a score of 2,950 and a score of 800 in the decision making section. And the only way I was able to do that was by having good technique and approach to all of these questions. In this video, we're going to be exploring some of the question types in decision making and looking at why it's important and how you can develop these skills in part 1. Then in part 2, we'll be going over some timing tips and the rest of the question types. You can also email me for free access to my UCAT notes, and make sure to check out my other videos as I have tips on my channel for all the different UCAT sections. Let's start off by taking a look at what decision making actually is and why is this even important for you to be able to do in your future as a healthcare professional, as a doctor, or as a dentist. So decision making is essentially testing your ability to make sound judgments in a complex situation. A lot of the situations that you are given, they are difficult and they require you to think differently, to approach differently, and that's really important because as a healthcare professional you'll often be faced with difficult cases, difficult patient scenarios, and you have to be able to essentially think quickly on your feet and come up with these solutions, and that is what the UCAT is testing in this section. So by thinking of it in this way, that you could possibly be helping a patient in the future, could help you feel just a little bit more motivated to approaching the section. Now within decision making you have 6 different question types and you have 35 questions with 37 minutes to answer them, giving you just over a minute to answer all the questions. Let's jump into the first of the 6 question types that you can get in the UCAT. One of the first questions is something called syllogisms, and as shown by the example on screen, syllogisms are basically questions where first you're given a stem, and in that stem it's around 1 or 2 sentences long, and it's basically giving you the rules of the question. So it's telling you about the scenario, it's just giving you any information, rules and things that you need to know. Then underneath that you're given 5 different statements or conclusions. With these conclusions you need to work out whether these are yes because they're true, or no because you're not sure if they're true or you can't assume they're true based off the information that you're given within the stem of the question. Now, when you're approaching these questions, it's really important to remember that they are worth 2 marks. So if you get 5 out of 5 of the statements correct, you'll get 2 marks. If you get 4 out of 5 correct, you'll get 1 mark. If you get more wrong though, so if you get 3 out of 5 or less, you will receive no marks. So for these questions, accuracy is really important and making sure you have the right approach to these. So when you're answering syllogisms questions, there are 2 different methods that you can be using. Method number 1 is something called the Venn diagram approach. So essentially based on the information that you're given in the passage or given in the stem of the question, you will just draw a Venn diagram for this. So if, for example, you're given 2 different variables and they have some form of overlap, you'll draw a Venn diagram with the 2 variables overlapping. And this is just a really visual way to help you understand what the question wants from you, and then you can just deduce from the statements what is true and what is false. The second approach is the shorthand approach. Now with this, again, you need to be able to understand the variables and the aspects of the question that is presented to you in the stem, but what you're doing from this is just identifying rules. So you can create a flow chart from this just by using arrows, or you can use mathematical symbols, for example, if one variable is greater than the other. Now both of these approaches are good ways of approaching the question itself, and it's really important that you test out during untimed and timed practice which of these methods works better for you, as both are effective and it just comes with practice as different people prefer different methods. Question type number 2 is something called interpreting information. Now these are probably one of the hardest type of questions that you can get in decision making. When you are given these questions, they can be done in different ways. Sometimes you can be given several lines of text that you have to read and it contains information in, and then you have to respond with yes or no. Sometimes you can be given loads of data. For example, you may be given a graph or a table, or sometimes be given both and you have to analyze multiple different data sets. Now when approaching these questions, if for example you are given one which has loads of text in it, for these, you approach it in a very similar way to how you approach questions in verbal reasoning. So you're not going to be reading the entire stem. What you're going to be doing is reading the statement first and then continually referring back. This process reduces any time wasting that you're doing and essentially helps you to understand a little bit more, and it's easier to process in comparison to if you read the stem first, because a lot of the information in the stem may not be useful and that could actually cause you to waste some time. If you are given loads of data, for example, if you're given tables and graphs, then there's a really important technique used called eyeballing data. And eyeballing data is also important in quantitative reasoning, so this is a good skill to learn. Eyeballing data is basically the idea that you're just able to skim read the data and then understand the question, understand what the data is showing you. So the way to effectively eyeball data is, if it's in a table, for example, then you will just skim read what the top column says and what the row says as well. This just tells you what it shows. You're not going to actually read any of the data values or try to understand them. Once you've eyeballed by this process, then you can go to the question and always read the question first and then go back to the data and try to understand the numbers. Never look at the numbers first, because you might not even need most of them. You have the same approach when you're looking at a graph. Look at what the x-axis and the y-axis is telling you, and then from that, only once you've read the question, go back and say, okay, this is the area of data that I need, or this is the specific number that I need to know. Because there's no point trying to learn the numbers for the entire graph, because realistically you will not be using most of them. It's also really important for these questions, again, not to make assumptions, only use information that you've been given in the data and that is provided to you. It is also a good idea to make sure you're using your whiteboard just to identify any rules or jot down any key points. As interpreting information questions are often more difficult and time consuming, it is recommended that when you see the question, just guess, flag, and then come back to it later when you have more time. Often, because of how much data you're presented with or how much text that is given in the STEM, it will take you longer than the minute that you're given. So by coming back later, you can dedicate enough time to it without compromising your time on the other questions. The third type of question that you can get in the decision-making section is something called recognizing assumptions. Now, these are definitely easier questions, so if you can do them in under 60 seconds, definitely aim to do so, because any extra time you save from these questions can be put forward to harder questions. When you're doing these questions, as shown in the example on screen, you are basically given a stem, which is saying some sort of statement, and then you are given 4 different statements underneath, either that are in agreement with that or they're disagreeing with it, and they're giving a reason why. Now, with these questions, to make sure that you're answering them effectively and that you're not answering based on your opinion, as that is something that can easily be done, is first you need to identify what is the main thing that they're talking about, essentially identify the subject, and then compare your answer options. Are they focusing on the correct subject? Because sometimes what happens is the answer options, either they are too broad or they are too specific. So make sure that they are actually addressing the correct subject and correct issue. And then look at the cause. So a lot of the time in the question, it will be one thing, which is the subject, that is causing something else. Now, again, that cause, it needs to be specific and the question needs to be focused. These questions, just doing enough practice of them, you'll be able to get the hang of understanding what is the subject, what is the cause, and making sure that all the answer options are focused and helps you to eliminate them a lot more easily. If you found this video helpful, make sure to check out part 2, where I go over the other 3 question types in decision making and also give you some timing tips which will help you to ace the section. Also, please feel free to email me for access to my UCAT notes and check out my other videos which go into a lot more detail, and don't forget to check out part 2 of decision making.